And now, please welcome co-founder and CEO at Dharma, Charaf Mansouri, Director of Product at Gathern, Faris Alaboud, and Managing Director at Thayer Ventures, Chris Hemmeter, in discussion with Skift Senior Hospitality Editor, Sean O'Neill.
Hello, everyone. So this panel is going to be about travel startups in the GCC and what needs to happen in order to be able to export startup innovation from the GCC to the rest of the world, build some world champions. Very happy to have this panel here today. Maybe we could start with you, Chris, because it's interesting to see from the perspective of Silicon Valley, where you come from. Thayer Ventures has about a dozen travel and mobility startups in its portfolio. Earlier this year, you took one of your portfolio companies, Sonder, went public. They created a SPAC at Thayer Ventures that took Inspirato public. And so when you've spent the past 10, 11 days here in the region, what would be the macro view on the opportunity in the GCC?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. And I think it's changed a lot over the last few years. We've been coming out here for the past 6 years, and I would say that, 5, 6 years ago, the community of startups in the region felt niche-y, small market products more than sort of companies in terms of perspective. And I think that has just dramatically changed in the last several years. At the macro level, I think the region is seeing just a tremendous amount of energy coming out of COVID, both in the just business travel category, alternative accommodations category. I think there's a real understanding that there's an opportunity to be a bridge play to what's happening in the African continent, which is extremely interesting at a number of levels, not just travel tech, but fintech and other technologies. And I also think that the integration and the proximity to India is very interesting. So we're starting to see now, I think, a more expanded view of what the region can be as a hub for startups and innovation. And I think companies are beginning to see themselves in that way, which is very important, right? When founders begin to have a more expansive view of their potential and the application of their innovations around the world. I also think that all of that is sitting on top of what is likely to be such an incredibly dynamic growth engine for travel for the next 25, 30 years. I mean, I was just in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia the last few days, and of course have spent time in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and across the region. The energy flowing into not just leisure travel, but business travel and group travel is so outstanding, and I believe is a sustained energy that we're likely to see last for decades. Importantly, what I hear consistently is everybody wants to do it differently. It's not, hey, we want to redo what you guys did in North America and Hawaii or in Europe. It's a new idea. So that's all about, how do we use technology across the value chain to put our own spin, frankly, on what is the world's largest industry. So very exciting to be here now.
Okay, cool, Chris. Thank you. So Faris, let's start with you. So maybe if you could bring up the slide that has Gathern.co's website and homepage. So tell us about Gathern. Is it fair to call it like an Airbnb for Saudi?
I mean, that's the company we're closest kind of aligned to, I think, in terms of offering. We are the largest accommodation provider in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have over 40,000 units in over 200 cities. I think what makes us a little different is the variety that we have and the way we have all of our users verified when they book, including guests and hosts. We were founded about 7 years ago. We've expanded very recently into kind of the peer-to-peer private accommodations market, growing quite rapidly. And I think based on kind of just to follow up on what Chris said, there's definitely a lot of growth that we see in the market, especially in Saudi. A lot of investment going into quite a lot of projects to, let's say, grow the local and regional tourism industry in the kingdom. As the first talk today, with the research done by Skift, we can see Saudi's trying to hit 10% on their tourism GDP, which is really exciting by 2030, and they're ahead of schedule, which is exciting.
It is very exciting. So you're the #1 online property booking in Saudi, is that right?
In terms of size, yes.
In terms of size.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that market is a tremendous domestic market, is that right?
Yeah, so this is something that a lot of people tend to overlook. More than 90%, I think is about 95% of all tourism in the kingdom is local and regional. So and that's kind of what we focus on at Gathern.
So we have some people watching online, and they may not know about how the alternative accommodation sector in Saudi may be different than in somewhere else, like in London. Or how do people rent out properties in Saudi?
So the thing about building the peer-to-peer market in Saudi, especially for us, is we had to educate the market about the offering, right? So we went not only to guests that travel to Saudi, of which I hope there will be many, or there are many in the audience. We also had to educate hosts on the fact that this is an offering that you should benefit from, and not too different from the international aggregators that that knock on the doors of big travel agencies and says, give me all the hotels that you've got. We had to convince these hosts one by one, right, to sign up to our platform and offer, and this took a lot of time and a lot of education. The market in Saudi is a little bit different. Our offering is a lot bigger. So for example, in Gathern, we don't only have apartments, we have chalets. For those of us in the Middle East, we have the concept of istiraha as well. We have farms and camps and caravans. So people book Gathern for the variety of offerings, not just for the apartments, which is, I guess, what the market is more popular for in the West.
And you have a lot of positive tailwinds because of the Saudi tourism effort to try to get people to tour all around, create events all around. And so if you want to have more local properties, people renting out, you have a lot of dynamic supply, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually have we had a direct partnership with the Royal Commission for Al Ula. We had one with the Commission for Asir, which is in the Western region, to help increase their supply. So they bring us over to teach their investors and property owners on the market and tell them a little bit more about peer-to-peer. And we see that growth every day.
Having more than 40,000 properties in just such a short span of time seems like you're sort of onto something. Charaf, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. Thanks for your patience. So Dharma in 2018, you founded it. It was back then an online travel agency focused on yoga-themed trips with a luxury twist. You have evolved the company since then, so tell us about your journey and where you are now.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. So in 2018 in London, we launched Dharma as an OTA, focused on luxury yoga retreats. And actually, very quickly, we realized two things. One is that we actually didn't have the funds to exist on the consumer-facing level. OTAs are spending an average of 35% of their revenue on customer acquisition. And so that was the bad news. The good news was actually that we sold out all of our trips, and we sold them out through the yoga teachers we were hiring. And so for us, that was quite a big realization to say, well, actually, instead of trying to exist on the consumer-facing level, why don't we move down the value chain? And so Dharma was born as basically a B2B2C solution that empowers or helps creators, be they chefs, be they yoga teachers, be they surfers, who have a big captive audience based on what they love, what their mastery is, basically create and sell trips to their audience. And I think for us, it's been quite a journey. We've been lucky to work with some incredible people, Eric Cantona, Pernod Ricard, Light Watkins, to name just a few. But just this idea that really is the basis of our core conviction that actually, if in the past 50 years we've traveled based on geography, I want to go to Bali, or I want to go to Turkey, or I want to go to Brazil, well, maybe the next 50 years, and that's our core conviction, travel will be passion-based, i.e. geography will be a secondary consideration, but really I want to go on a meditation retreat with my favorite meditation teacher. I want to discover, India or Turkey or, Mexico through the eyes of my favorite chef. And so for us, I guess from a transactional level, the opportunity is there to kind of allow creators who have a big captive audience to monetize their fandom through travel experiences. But on a philosophical level, the idea is to say, well, maybe like me, there are millions of others around the world who, if our parents or our grandparents had an identity that was based on, the nation, the extended family, the religion, etc. Well, today I think a lot of us have kind of reassigned or re-identified with a lot of the online tribes that we follow, whether it's our favorite yoga teacher or our favorite chef or our favorite surfer. And I think there's a massive opportunity to bring this idea of belonging and this idea that maybe travel isn't just about finding your place, but actually finding your people as well.
Okay, so there's a few things there that I'd like to pull out. So while you were talking, Charaf, we showed a video of the Manchester United captain, Eric Cantona, looking FC. I guess my understanding of what Dharma does is you're a business to consumer. So you're sort of like a white label tour operator that is using software automation to sort of generate the bookable itineraries. So let's say I have a Netflix TV show and it's themed about travel. I go to Dharma and I say, hey, could you create some bookable itineraries for this? The advantage is I'm bringing my customer base. I have the audience, so you don't have to do the customer acquisition. Another thing you pointed out there is that you're sort of flipping the script. So for the past 20 years, many online travel agencies have been doing destination-based travel. You go, you have to know where you want to go at the start of your experience online. You're taking this to more of a passion-based thing. So Chris, one thing he said was that when he started Dharma, he was doing direct-to-consumer and it was really hard. What is your view as a VC now? Do you favor the consumer or do you favor a business-to-business approach when investing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I need a favorite yoga teacher. I think that sounds like a great luxury. Yeah, we've changed in our view there. I mean, when we started our firm a dozen years ago, we avoided the top of the travel funnel like the plague, right? The online travel agencies were just snuffing out all innovation. We saw again and again sort of this phenomenon of the low-hanging fruit where great ideas would get to 10,000, 20,000 users, and then as they tried to penetrate, take off velocity, their cost of acquisition would skyrocket and it just wouldn't work. I think that has changed. There has been an opportunity to get more sort of verticalized within the category, but it has to be innovative, it has to be unique. One of the problems that we face with leisure travel in particular is that it's just not that frequent, right? So a lot of times, we get excited about travel ideas, but we forget that users might only engage in that process of shopping for and buying travel 2 to 3 times a year. So it's very hard to leave some sort of sustained brand impression in them. You have to go back and reacquire the customer every time they play. B2B is a different story, right? Business to business, whether software, services, platforms, marketplaces, is a very different value proposition where one can truly analyze ROI, can help startups with contacts and connections to accelerate businesses. And so that tends to be an area that we focus. It also happens to be one of the areas of just enormous opportunity across the travel value chain, which we all know is an industry that has historically been resistant to the adoption of technology. Lodging in particular, I don't think the delivery of hospitality has changed much in 55 years. That's starting to happen now, especially as we're seeing a changing traveler.
Cool. So Faraz, how do you handle customer acquisition at Gathern?
So the thing that serves us as a challenge today, like I mentioned earlier, is building that education, right? We acquire our customers through, first of all, we have an insane network effect as a result of the hundreds of thousands of reviews we get on our platform. So word of mouth tends to be kind of, especially for local travel, tends to be the best way we get around. And I guess the value proposition that we provide to customers is a little bit different from what exists in the market. And we use most of kind of your common, let's say, customer acquisition methods, social media and the rest. But we do a lot of kind of the direct marketing or direct educational marketing with a lot of our partners. A really good example of this is the Saudi Tourism Authority, the Ministry of Tourism. We work very closely with them to not only, so for example, for the Saudi Tourism Authority, they help us kind of define where the next destinations in Saudi should be, especially seasonally throughout the year. Saudi is quite diverse in its geographic offering. So we have a lot of cities that are very nice in the winter, a lot of cities that are much nicer in the summer than Riyadh, for example. If some of you have been to Riyadh in the summer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we work with the Ministry of Tourism to help regulate the market, to make people feel more comfortable entering the market. In fact, we had a big role in the draft regulations that came out about a month ago that are specifically designed for peer-to-peer marketplaces and peer-to-peer rentals. Gathern is currently the only licensed marketplace for peer-to-peer rentals in Saudi. And we take pride in that. And these little things, they make us look different in front of the customer.
That makes logical sense. So Charaf, you got some prestige funding for UAE, getting Charaf as a major VC backer. Some of your other investors are impressive. What is your view of the GCC in terms of its startup funding ecosystem? How supportive is it to help generate world-class champions?
Yeah, I like to think of, Abu Dhabi and Dubai as your sort of San Francisco and the Valley for the US, for the MENA region. We moved back to Morocco in 2019 to grow the business, and then I guess all travel businesses have this sentence or this transition, and then March 2020. So we went out to market, and I think it's telling that probably the only people in the world that were taking a 50-year view on tourism at the time were here. And so we were picked up by Mubadala and their startup program, Hub 71, in Abu Dhabi in November 2020, and have been here ever since. So in my mind, first of all, I think that if you're looking at travel and hospitality and where this has been, I think this region is at the forefront of what's being done globally. So it's only natural that it is looking and translating into the tech and travel tech space. Again, as a Moroccan from Casablanca, for me, this is the closest center of access to capital, access to people, and access to markets. The natural kind of link for me. Maybe in the past 20 years it would have been Paris or maybe London. I think today it's Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and I think we're very, very grateful to be here and for all the programs that are available. Shuruq is also, Shuruq and BNY are our local institutionals. We have two, one US and one European institutional as well. And it also just goes to show that, I think the mentality here is we're ready to build the global champions. It's no longer, hey, let's try to build, a national or regional. It's no, we're ready to back you. Ibrahim Ajami, who's the head of Mubadala Ventures, he came to speak at Hub 71 on our first week there, and he's like, our value proposition for startups is quite simple. We can invest anywhere from 1 to 500 million into your startup.
Wow.
And so I think to be in an environment that's basically able to take you from seed to IPO, as long as you continue delivering, of course, and that's kind of a unique value proposition, as he said.
It sounds tremendous. So Faris, what would you say is as you go from seed up through the scale to Series E, is there adequate funding at all stages for local in the GCC?
So, I can speak for Saudi. I think there's definitely a mature ecosystem for seed to Series A funding. I think the Series B kind of realm is a little bit empty. I do think there's a lot of progress being made in that. We're currently in the process of closing a round of investment, and we've seen that as a challenge for sure. But I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll definitely see some good growth in that.
Okay. So Chris, I've covered travel technology as a reporter for about a decade, and my anecdotal experience is that companies, they're good at growing from the seed to the Series B range. And then around Series B to C, sort of like a plane trying to go through the sound barrier. You can kind of feel the plane is shaking and bolts are coming out of the system. And it's partly, my interpretation is that it's it's making those strategic decisions. How much time should the CEO be doing on brand sales? Do you hire a VP of accounting? Like a lot of those strategic growth levels is where things go. And firms like Thayer could help with mentorship about what enterprise best practices are. What is your experience in working with startups? Do you see some sort of pattern like that?
Absolutely. I mean, look, there is nothing that's more challenging than to build a company all the way to true cash flow positive that is generating enough cash flow to sustain then ultimate growth. I know there are CEOs in the room who have gone through that, and most of it, at least the men that I know, have no hair left. So it's, it's a brutal ride. And it's, some of it is that one of the common mistakes we all make when evaluating, especially vertical specific companies, is we overestimate the addressable market. And so some of that Series B problem is that we sort of start to run into an unforeseen cap in the TAM that the value proposition of the company is attacking. And so it forces either new product launches or there's suddenly a demand on the business to do some things that are new. And often those don't work. And so we see companies struggle. Look, I think that when we talk about a healthy startup financing ecosystem, I mean, we've got two extraordinary examples of winning use cases up here. But I'd still say that just from my view broadly, in order for the region to really be a healthy, productive hub, I think there's a lot more work to be done. I think it has to be a greater range of diversity of players. It just can't be large pools of concentrated capital that pick a few winners. It has to be competitive, dynamic organizations that have real skin in the game, and it takes a while to build that. And I think that that's what I hope to see over the next 5 to 10 years is the beginning of a true development of an ecosystem, which involves players not just from not homegrown investors from the region, but also players from across the world that begin to get serious about the region and collaborate and build offices here. And that's the kind of thing that begins to create a truly sustainable platform. And then, of course, what remains to be seen is, how do we collectively in the region incorporate the concept of risk and failure, right? Because one of the things that's unique about Silicon Valley is, in a strange way, failure is almost celebrated, right? And the truth is, and this is a truth that is, I think, common across the world, the single biggest factor that drives success as an entrepreneur is taking multiple at-bats. You've got to have the ability to take swings, fail, get up, dust off your knees, and take another at-bat. And that means you have to live in a world where you can fail and not be crushed. So it'll be interesting to see if that sort of drives the ecosystem here, because that's a critical imperative to keep great founders around.
Now, Charaf, one of the sort of inbound, in parallel with that infrastructure being developed, will be the region having much more inbound tourism, so you mentioned with Dharma starting with yoga. How important is like the wellness market? Is there an opportunity to bring wellness from other regions to come in, from China, Russia, Europe to here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when you look at the real wellness and yoga retreat centers in Europe, whether it's Southern Europe or Western Europe, they're sold out in many cases 24 months in advance, and they have quite a limited season. So, I mean, May to October sometimes in Italy, but from October to May, in essence, you have an incredible and a continued demand on outbound wellness, and no real options. Marrakesh stands alone in many ways. So I think for me, there's a massive luxury wellness travel opportunity inbound into the Middle East, and Abu Dhabi already is building product for it. I think there's an opportunity for Dubai to rebrand to a certain extent on some of those properties and on this market, and on the whole region. Wellness travel, I think, is a 600 billion plus market, obviously breaking down then the primary, secondary, and you're at around 100 billion a year. And so I think it's a massive opportunity to actually to realize that during winter there is no competitor, and there's everything to build here. So yeah, I'm very excited about what the future of wellness in the region, for sure.
Cool. So, Chris, I think we have a lot of people in the audience who are either working with startups or who are entrepreneurs who have always secretly dreamed of creating a startup. So, as a VC, what is it that you look for in a pitch deck?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, it's actually quite simple, but the answers are complex. I think one of the things that entrepreneurs need to do is define really the addressable market. As I mentioned before, getting that wrong can often lead to mistakes that we make as founders, but also as entrepreneurs. So a truly dynamic and growing large addressable market is critical. Some sort of a product-driven thesis that's based on an inefficiency that exists in the market. It can't just be about, hey, this is a really cool idea. It's got to be like, what are you actually solving? What pain is being solved? Why is that solution ultimately defendable? And unique and novel? That's important. A lot of people can sometimes have insights about a great solve to a product, but forget that we live in a highly competitive, dynamic world. And as investors, we put money in and we hope to get that money out in 6 to 8 years. So how you do in the first 9 months is just not relevant. So competitive dynamics matter. And then, of course, people and unit economics and progress. I mean, so people is obvious. Unit economics is, again, just the fundamental business model. I think we're now back at a time where business model matters again. And so having a real understanding of how you're going to drive great unit economics. And then the one thing, this is so important for all startup founders in the room, and this is something that everybody fails to remember. Progress is a really important thing to talk about, right? Every startup founder at any given time is making progress. Whether it's a few phone calls you've had, a few interactions you've had, a new advisor you've added to your group. And there's an opportunity when you're meeting investors at the end of the meeting to always say, hey, listen, do you mind if I keep you updated on my progress? Then you get that email address, and now you've got somebody that you can communicate with every 90 days and talk about your progress. Because again, entrepreneurship is not just about taking at bats, it's about getting into the batter's box. So when you show that you've got the moxie to make progress and you tell people about that, you cultivate followers. And then when the time is right, you can get financed. I rarely ever see a deck that has a slide on progress. But I think it's an important tool that many should adopt.
Silicon Valley is going to have to update its metaphors to cricket or some local football sports for if you want to dive into the region more.
Sorry about the at-bats. Shots on goal? Important for a Moroccan fan.
Yes, hopefully for Morocco tonight. I'm wondering, far as about the opportunity for blended travel, blended business and leisure. Are you seeing that in Saudi domestically, or?
We think there's an opportunity for that to grow. Obviously with the pandemic, that's been kind of there's been a spike for that everywhere in the world. It is part of the arts, the segment that we target, absolutely. And we expect to be focusing on that a little bit more in the future.
So I was wondering, Charaf, I know it's a little bit of a light topic, but you have your background from Morocco, very excited about the game tonight. Do you think that the World Cup and the enthusiasm is really going to help sort of translate to other aspects of life for Morocco?
I mean, look, I think for us, it's always been like, we're going to come, we're going to compete, we're going to try our best, we're going to go home. I think this coach is like, we're here to win. We're not here to compete. And I think that's a generational mindset shift of like, oh yeah, actually we can win. We're not here just to beautifully compete. We actually are here to win. And I mean, it's inspiring to me, and I think it's going to be inspiring to not only Moroccans, but like, everyone who's used to losing, let's say, or who's not used to winning, let's say. Let's put it that way. That's a better way to put it. So, yeah,
we're back to the at-bats metaphor. Right?
Yes.
Mostly we strike out. So mindset change.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good point to end on. It's amazing the opportunity you've had in Saudi Arabia, the fact that you're coming close to having another round. Same for you at Dharma. Those are testaments that people who have looked at your books believe that there's a real opportunity here and real growth. So thank you so much for doing this panel with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.